Hello everyone, this video's clip is for you to understand chapter 7. Chapter 7 is basically it is about DDL, which stands for data definition language. And with this language you can create a view and table and some other types of objects. So let's start with chapter 7. You're going to learn how to create table and constraint. So basically, a table is one of objects. So there are many different type of objects like table, view, sequence, synonym, and index. Those kind of indexes, those kind of objects can be found in your Oracle database. So table, view, index, package, procedure, and as you can see, there are more objects, different types of objects. So, but this chapter 7 only delivers contents about creating table. In the previous edition, chapter 7 through chapter 7 and 8, students needed to understand to create a table, view, and sequence, and the other type of objects. But for 12C, you only need to understand how to create a table. Okay, so let's get started. And to create a table, you need to understand data type. We already have looked at data types, many different types of data types in previous chapters. But these chapters. So just remind what kind of data types are available on Oracle database. First type is character type, second is numeric, and third is date and time data type. So char, which is fixed length character type, char 2, which is variable length character type, and there are more different data types under character. And number, binary, and float, all double. There are more, and also there are more different types of numeric data types. And date, timestamp, and time zone under date time. So the reason why you need to understand the data type is define data type for columns is required. So defining data types for columns in a table is required. So let's get started. Let's see the example here. So first, this is the name of a table, and this is name of columns. These are name of columns, and then right after column name, you must define data type and constraint. As you can see, all columns in this table has its own data type. Number for employee ID, date for time in, date for timeout, and voucher 2, which is variable length character for updated by, and timestamp with local time zone data type for update time. So without defining data types, you can't create a table. So this is why you have to remind what kind of data types are available on Oracle database. So to create objects or table, you need to understand the structure of SQL language, which is called DDL. Okay. So, and to before starting to making an example code of DDL, you need to understand some of the restrictions, such as column names. You can have up to 30 characters for column names, and there are only 3 symbols are allowed for name of column and table. In other words, dollar, underscore, and shop. Those 3 symbols are only the symbol which are allowed for the name of columns and table. And these names are case sensitive. Only when you have the name within double quotation. Otherwise, the name of the tables are not case sensitive. Okay, so along with the table, you can create temporary tables if you have option with GTT. So we're going to see some examples how to create tables. Alright, this is a sample code to create table will be named EMP underscore punch. And in this table, if you run this query, then in this table there will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and employee ID data type for employee ID is number, and 6 is the maximum length for the column. Okay, and non-null constraint is defined for employee ID. That means every time end users, including you and the other users, when they insert data into employee underscore punch table, employee ID needed to be defined. But unlike employee ID, time in, time out, and updated by and updated time does not don't record null value except for EMP. And there is another constraint. Default user is check constraint. Well, we're going to see some other type of constraint, but anyway. So if you don't have constraint, but the minimum by default, you need to define name of columns and type of data, right? And if you want to mandate, or if you give some more constraint on the column, then you can add the constraint after data type and its length, or without length. So let's create, by using this query, let's create a table. Okay, so let's make sure if you have employee underscore punch table or not. Right now I don't have the table, so if I run this query, and by the way, unlike DML, you cannot go back to previous stage once you successfully executed DDL. That means if you mistakenly delete a table or create a table, you can't go back to a previous stage. So when you execute DDL, you really need to be very careful before execute the query. Okay, so let me run this query. Then table employee punch created. Right, so let me refresh here. Then you will have employee underscore punch, and there are 5 columns and data type as you defined. Okay, so this is how to create a table, but this is a little more complicated. So let me create a very simple table. Okay, to create a table, you need to start with the create, and you have to specify object type. So we looked at what kind of objects are available on database, Oracle database. First one is table and view and sequence and synonym and index. So if you want to create a table, then you have to specify the object type, which is a table. Then you have to name the table. For instance, I'm going to name the table, which is Chris. So you can the numbers are available for the table name or column name, but you can't start with number for the name of columns and nor the table. So in other words, this will be fine for the name, but this is not fine. This is fine too as well, right? And in the middle of or at the end of name, you can add three types of symbol: shop, underscore, dollar. That's it. Only threes. So I'm going to name my table as table Chris. Alright, and then within parentheses you can define name of columns and data type of column. So let's say column 1, and column 1 will be char 2, which is various length of character, and its maximum length is 10. And then if you want to specify some other constraint, then you can specify like this after the data type. Well, if you don't want it, then that's fine. So this query will create a table, will be named table Chris with one column 1. Okay, right, now let me run this query. Then table Chris is created, and let me refresh. Okay, so I have my table with only one column, right? So what if you want to create table with multiple columns? Then you have to add column. You have to use separator, which is comma, and you can define with different type of data type, such as number. Okay, if you want to add more column, if you want to create a table with another column, you can have another column after comma, such as column 3 date. And then at the lastly, you shouldn't have any comma if you just want to have 3 columns only, right? So but if I run this query, then I will have error, which is duplicated error. That means name is already used by existing objects. So that means that because there is already table named table Chris, I can't create. So to run this query, I'm going to delete the table using drop command. Okay, so and just like create, you must specify object type drop table and table Chris. So you can practice, when you practice this DDL, you can name your object as table underscore and your first name for your practice. So let me delete the table, then so table Chris is dropped. So again, it's not delete or remove. If you want to delete an object, you must use drop command. Right, then if I refresh, then I don't have table Chris any longer. So because I just made sure I don't have table Chris, I can execute this query. Alright, table Chris is created. Refresh. Then I have table Chris with 3 columns. Right? Let me drop the table again to test if column can create with table can create with a column in the column in which number starts for the column name, right? So you can't. I already have it on the red colored. That means I have syntax error here. So invalid identifier. That means I can't create table like this, but I can create like this, right? Right. And then if you want to modify a table, you can use alter command, and just like create and drop to use the alter command, you must specify its object type, which is table. So what you can do with alter table is you can add a column, you can modify existing column, or you can rename the table, or you can drop a column in the table. So let me show some example. If you want to add column, right now I have 3 columns only. But if you want to add one more column here, you can add column table. You can add column 4 with what? You must specify. Its data type, which is its maximum length is 2, and the data type is a fixed length. And if you want to add constraint, which is not null, you will modify after run this query. You will have table with another column named column 4 with not null constraint. Alright, so right now I only have 3 columns, right? And if I run this query, then I will have one more column with not null constraint. In other words, if anyone wants to insert new data into this table, column 4, value for column 4 is mandated. Okay, so what I can do is alter table. You can rename the column, such as okay, so I'm going to copy this part because I don't want to repeat to type. You can rename column. Okay. Column 4 to column 4, like this. Then column 4 will be renamed with column 4. So column 4, right? And if you want to its data type, for instance, if you want to increase its maximum length from 5 to 9 for column 2, then you can give this modify option, column 2 number 9. So its maximum length is not 5 any longer, but 9. Okay, so it's 9, right? So it is always possible to increase its maximum length, but sometimes it is impossible to reduce its maximum length if under the condition when certain value is shorter than new maximum length, you can't reduce its maximum length. For instance, let me insert the table, insert into table quiz. Test 3, 4, 5, 10, and state, and what else? Column 4. Column 4 is 1. Okay, so if I run this query, then missing is like insert into column 2 3, 4 values. One row inserted. So let me go to, so in this case the maximum length for current maximum value under column 2 is 5. So in this case it is possible to reduce its maximum length from 9 to 5. Okay, must be empty, decrease. Okay, so the 5, well, the maximum length 5 contains its precision, so maybe 6. Okay, let me refresh it. Okay, so well, if there is a value under that, it is, well, actually it is impossible. I just tested. Well, some other versions are available, but it is impossible to reduce its maximum length. But what if I want to increase its length from 9 to 10? Then it is possible, right? Now it's 10, right? And I only have one data, and its current length under column 2 is just 5. But it is impossible to reduce its length, right? So when you need to, well, when you need to design a table, it's better to, because it is possible to increase its maximum length. But if you have too long maximum length, you will waste storage which will be allocated for your table. So it is best. The best option is choose the optimized maximum length for the columns, for your columns. All right. So let's start. Let me show another example. Let's modify 2 columns at the same time. Okay, so right, let me copy this one. And then what if you want to modify 2 columns at the same time? For instance, right now column 3, column 1, its maximum length is 10. But what if you want to increase its maximum length from 10 to 11? Then you have to use parentheses. Okay, and then within the parentheses you can add another column, 2 to 11. I'm sorry, comma. Then you can modify 2 columns at the same time. Then table is altered, right? And now its maximum length is 10, 11, and 10. Okay, so I didn't want it to be okay. So let's, and also if you want to drop, if you want to rename the column, I'll show the rename. And what if you want to remove a column? For instance, if you don't think column 4, if you don't think column 4 is required any longer, then you can drop. But you must make sure, you need to make sure if all rows value of the all rows under certain column is null or not. In other words, any row contains a value for the column that you want to remove, you can't. So in other words, alter table, drop to remove remove the column, you can use drop option. Drop column 4. So right now I don't have any syntax error, but if I run this query 4, oh, it's deleted. Well, in previous version doesn't allow it, but anyway, it is possible to remove column regardless of no matter the value is stored on the certain column. So anyway, if you just run this query, then entire value under certain column will be deleted. So you really need to be cautious when you run this kind of query. Okay, so what if you want to just remove the table? You can use drop table command. What if you want to modify column and table name? So far we practiced many the alt table command only modified columns, but what if you want to modify table name itself? Then still you have to use enter table command, table is rename to new table name, such as table DDL Chris. So let me run this query. Then table Chris will not exist any longer, but TBL Chris will be exist if I run this query. Alright, table is altered, right? And let me refresh. TBL Chris is here, right? And you need to compare with the command with rename for renaming table and renaming column. So you must have another sub option if you want to modify column name. But if you just want to modify table name, then rename to is good enough. Okay, so let me rename TBA Chris to table Chris back, because I want to keep the table name. Alright, so TBA Chris is modified to table Chris. Alright, so so we have one also step, right? So I'm going to show another example, to create a table with constraint or different type of constraint. So because I already have bonuses, let me drop table bonuses. Well, let me keep its name. I don't want to delete it, but I will create table will be named bonus. Create table bonus, and so I'm going to insert column name within this parenthesis, employee ID, which is about chart 2, just like employee ID, employees story and not null. So employee ID is record salary number 922 and bonus number 922. Okay, but what I want, a constraint that I want to put here is bonus needs to be greater than 0. Okay, well, otherwise there's no meaning. The meaning to have bonus exclusive bonus table. So constraint check bonus And so if you want to add constraint, then you can add constraint after the last column. So if the non-null constraint can be written right after the data type, but different constraint such as check constraint should be added after the last column. So if you have constraint option, that means the thing will locate after the things will be located after constraint is constraint, and you can specify the name of constraint, and then you must specify the type of constraint. In this case, it's check. So, and you can define the constraint within the parenthesis after check. So, bonus should be greater than 0, right? Okay, so you can create a bonus table with 3 columns with one check constraint. So let me create a table. Then you must have bonus constraint, right? I don't have any data yet, so let me test the table. Insert into bonus values 100, 5,000, 0. So actually from Oracle 12c, so the data type for employee is voucher, right? So we, with the previous versions like 11g, it is mandated to have character type value within single quotation, but from 12c, even if you didn't type it, Oracle automatically recognize if this value is for voucher or character type. So this is fine as well. But many other databases is mandate for you to put the value within single quotation if it is a character type, right? But let me put in 100, A100, and 5 is salary, and 1 is the bonus, right? This is fine, right? Because all the values doesn't violate any constraint. I have something for a column which doesn't allow null value, and also have bonus greater than 0, right? What about zero? Check constraint violated. That means this value doesn't comply with constraint on this bonus table. So if you go to column, then you don't see any constraint, but if you go to constraints tab, then you will see there are 2 constraints, check and not null. Okay, so alright, so what if I want to insert null value for bonus? Okay. Let's test it. One row inserted. So anyway, null value doesn't need to comply with the check constraint. So in this case, it is possible to insert a value without actual value, right? Alright, so then if you want to modify or remove the constraint, then you can use alter table option as well. So alter table bonus drop. If you want to remove constraint, then you can. I'm sorry. I need to have table option. Table bonus drop constraint, and you must make sure what is name of constraint. So we have name for check constraint, which is ck underscore bonus, but this constraint, which is start with sys, is defined by the system. This constraint is now no value, right? Now not defined after here, right? But it doesn't mean it is convenient to define not null after column name, but it doesn't mean you can't define its constraint name. Actually, it is possible. So you must make sure what constraint you want to delete. So let's say I want to remove ck underscore bonus, then let me see. Let me delete this column and this constraint. Then, so you have to name the constraint. So if I run this query, then not null constraint will be dropped from the table, right? So the table was altered. That means this kind of query is also possible to execute. The reason is employee ID is not null constraint any longer. So let me run this query. One row is ready. Then let me go back to data tab. Then I have three data, right? But before remove the constraint, not null constraint, it was impossible to insert without value for employee ID. Alright, so if you want to add constraint, okay, let me delete. If you want to add new constraint, you can add table. You can use alt table option command and add constraint. Is a good option to add new constraint. So for instance, if you want to add a primary key, then you can name the constraint, which is pk employee. And when you define the name of constraint, it is better to start with certain alphabets to specify the type of constraint. So by seeing the name of a constraint, you should be able to expect what type of constraint it is. Okay, so if the constraint starts with a pk, that is about primary key, and if the constraint starts with ck, something like this, then you can imagine the constraint is check constraint. But anyway, let me run this query and to add primary key constraint. That means some column name will be located after primary key constraint. That will be defined as primary key. That means any value under employee ID are not duplicated. That means employee ID values is unique. So let me check out. I have unique values, right? A100, A102, a null value. So let me test it. So column constraint null value. In other words, if there is null value for this, any row contain null value under column which will be defined as a primary key, you can't define the column as primary key. In other words, you shouldn't have this row value. So if you run this query, after run this query, delete from bonus where emp id equals null, then so is null, is null. Okay, one row deleted. Refresh it. So I only have 2 rows, and all rows has value for employee ID. So I can add a constraint, primary key constraint, on employee ID. And also all those values are unique, right? So I added, just executed the query, and if I go back to constraint tab on bonus, then I have 2 constraints, check constraint and primary constraint. So that means all values, by having primary key constraint, all values for employee EMP ID will be unique. No values allowed and no duplicate values allowed for EMP ID. And if you go back to employees, so we have 11 tables, and we have employee ID, but unlike our expectation, employee ID is not defined as primary key yet. So, but if you go to the data tab, then you will see all the values are not null, and also all the values are not duplicated. So that means technically it is possible to define employee ID as a primary key. So let's define employee ID in employees table as a primary key. How can we do that? We can just leverage this query, right? Out the table, and you need to modify employee table name, employees constraint pk. Well, I will click the name of constraint because I like it. The primary key, it shouldn't be EMP ID, employee ID, right? Employee ID. So if you run this query, then specify unique constraint name for. Okay, let me see if there's any no duplicated value. I got it. Because the name of constraints are global. That means if you have constraint name, same constraint name in the database, not on the table, you can't have same name of constraint. So I need to have, I already have PK employee, right? So I need to define, and well, before to do this, let me drop this constraint. Alter table bonus drop constraint, and so the way to define primary key for employees is either I have different name of constraint like pk underscore employee 2, or you need to remove existing constraint. So let me choose the second way. Alright, and then now I can create a constraint named pk underscore on pk underscore employee on employees table. Alright, so table employees and altered, right? So I have pk underscore employee on this table, but the name of constraints are global. That means you can't have same name of constraint in your database. Alright, so let me move to I start to modify employees table. Let me modify employees table. So if you go to employees, then you'll see job ID, right? Job ID and manager ID, department ID. Those you can see those columns refers certain value from other table, such as job ID refers job ID from jobs table, and department ID refers department ID from departments. So what if you want to mandate refer value, only the value which is defined jobs or department? So this kind of behavior is called reference, or it is called foreign key in relational database. So if you want to create, or if you want to modify, or if you want to add foreign key, you can create table option, and under that table 1, and if is column, you can define column 1 and number chart 2, and then you can add well, let me show the example first. How to create how to add foreign key. Okay, so on employees, so by having foreign key on employees table with job ID reference and department reference, you can mandate job ID in employees need to look at the job ID only defines in jobs table or only defines in department table. So at the table, let me show you the example. At the table and employees. Okay. Oh, before doing that, let me see jobs table as well. Jobs table, okay. Okay, so as you can see, there's job ID, but job ID is not null column, but is not defined as primary key. So let me define primary key for jobs first. The reason is to mandate certain column to refer to other table, the reference value needs to be defined as a primary key. Okay, so let me define job ID as a primary key in jobs table first. Alt table jobs add constraint pk job primary key job ID, then job ID will be defined as primary key. Okay, so I have one constraint here on jobs table. But if I run this query, then job ID is the primary key. That means job ID in jobs table is ready to be a reference for job ID in employees table. So I'm ready to modify employees table. Add foreign key job ID in employees table. This table will refer jobs table job ID in jobs table. Okay, so add foreign key job ID reference jobs. Oh, here. Okay, so let me run this query. Then missing keyword employees add foreign key. Oh. FK, you need to define the name of column. Add foreign key. There are several ways to add foreign key. Another one way is add constraint. Oh, I need to I need to define. I can add constraint the name of foreign key fk job fk job. Well, let me just name it fk job, and you have to specify type of constraint, and this column will look at this column in jobs table. Okay, so add constraint fk job foreign key job ID reference jobs. Okay, I think I'm good right now. Missing keyword. Employees add constraint fk job foreign key job ID. Okay, I don't get it. Outer table employees add constraint fk job foreign key job ID reference jobs. Maybe I think I'm a typo somewhere in here. This is my error. Well, anyway, so this is the right query. Outer table name, the name of table, add constraint as foreign key, name of foreign key, and type of constraint, which is foreign key, and this table will have foreign key. In other words, this table will look at this column will look at job ID in jobs table. So if I run this query, then table is entered. So I have a foreign key constraint. Here, employees. Sorry, I have FK job, right? That means if you look at this information, reference tables jobs, right? This column will look at jobs table. In other words, when you update or when you insert a new employee or when you modify existing employee, their jobs ID needs to be matched one of value in jobs table, right? So this is how to create a modified table, and also there's another way to create a table, which is combined with select. So if you go to last page, then also there's some different constraint. Check, not null, unique. Well, unique is quite similar to primary key, but primary key has more limitation. In other words, if you think about if you need to create a student table, then you may create a table with a student first and last name and student ID and social security number. But if it is possible to create a social security number as a unique constraint, but it is impossible to create the social security number as a primary key. The reason is, think about, there are some international students who can't have a social security number. In this case, sorry. Okay, so I got a phone call. I'm sorry. I don't know. Well, I don't understand why I always receive phone call when I record the video clip anyway. So let me finalize the last page, the last part of this chapter. So unique is different. Well, unique could be different. Unique value, once the column is defined as unique value, the values will be unique, but it doesn't mean the unique value can be primary key. Unique is one of candidate primary key. In other words, you may have several unique columns, such as social security number and student ID. Every student have different and unique student ID, and also every student has different social security numbers. But if that column is not main interest of the institution which the database used for or used by, it's better to define, or if it's better to have interesting or column which will be used by the institution. So you have to be exclusive column for the institution to make certain column as a primary key. So social security number is also unique, but it is not main interest of university only, but student ID is the main interest of the university. So student ID have to be primary key, although social security number can be unique constraint or unique column. So you can create a column with constraint option, type and name, and unique constraint option or sub option. All right, and let's go to this last page 24, which is the last third page of this chapter. So you can combine with select statement when you create a new one. For instance, this copy, let me show the example. Create table employee EMP new or high salary. Okay, employee with high salary. So new table will be named as employees high salary, and this to create a table with employee for employee who earns high salary. Okay, combine select statement. But you shouldn't forget you have as between create and select. Okay, and then let me put the select statement within parentheses. Select star from employees where salary is greater than 6,000. Okay, then let me shrink table list, and if I run this query, then I will have employees underscore high salary. Okay, let me run this query. Okay, table employee high salary is created. And then let me refresh it. Then I have new table, right? And if you create table with select, then data type of the columns is copied, and also constraints are also copied. That means you have four constraints, right? And you have same data type, but constraints which are not copied with this kind of query is the other constraint, like check constraints, are copied, but foreign key and primary key are not copied. Okay, so this is the characteristic when you create with select statement. Okay, well, so this is it, and well, you may have the assignment for on this chapter is kind of more complicated than previous assignments, so you really need to practice to create several practice tables by yourself by referring queries I showed it so far. And thank you for watching video clip. This is it, and thank you for watching video clip, and I will see you guys in the next video clip.